I was looking at a map of the Democratic Republic of Congo this morning, just, staring at it while I was drinking my coffee. And I was trying to wrap my head around a specific number, 215.
That's what, the number of languages spoken inside that one border?
Exactly. 215 distinct languages. I mean, that is a staggering amount of cultural density.
It really is.
But here's the number that actually made me put my coffee mug down. Out of those 215, 170 of them, they haven't even started the process of Bible translation.
Wow. It's a complete blackout.
It's a silence. And that's where we're going today. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
We're looking at the Missions Connect mandate for week 6 of 2026. So we're right at the end of January, pushing into February.
And all the research this week really forces us to zoom in on East and Central Africa.
It really does.
And we should be clear about the mission here. We're not just, reciting geography facts.
Yeah.
We're looking at what missiologists call the hardest places of the Great Commission.
Right. The goal isn't just to be informed. The source material is very specific. It's informed, strategic, scripture-based intercession.
Right. We want to move past that, that vague bless the missionaries prayer.
Yeah, get specific.
And get into the nitty-gritty of what's actually happening on the ground in 2026. Because when you look at the reports, and we've got a stack of them here from TCK training, open surveillance data, field updates, it's intense.
It is. You really have 3 massive crises just colliding in this one region. You have this logistical race to translate the Bible in the middle of a disease and terror hot zone.
Okay.
You have this concept of dual spiritual warfare, which we'll get into. And then you have a very quiet, very painful crisis happening with the families and the children who are serving there.
So let's start with the silence, the translation frontier. We mentioned the 170 languages in the DRC, but looking at the data, this isn't just a Congo problem, is it?
No, it's a regional blockade. If you look at the Central African Republic, the KRR, you're looking at 96 languages total. And 85 of them still need work.
Yeah.
Even Uganda, which has been, more stable historically, has 22 languages waiting.
Okay, so let's pause there, because the skeptic in me, or, maybe just the pragmatic part of my brain, is asking, why? I mean, we have AI, we have global travel. Is it just that nobody cares about these specific tribes? Is it a lack of interest?
It's not lack of interest. It's almost entirely about danger. The sources describe this region as facing a convergence of crises.
A convergence of crises.
Yeah. Think about what it takes to translate a Bible. It takes years of focus. But in this region, you have decades of intertribal violence that makes travel between villages just lethal.
Yeah.
You have recurring Ebola outbreaks that trigger military-enforced quarantines.
It's hard to have a translation committee meeting when you can't leave your house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you have the active targeting of Christians by groups like ISIS-BRC and the Allied Democratic Forces. So the old model, the one we all have in our heads, of the Western couple living in a hut for 30 years, that's functionally impossible in places like North Kivu or Ituri. You just become a high-value hostage target.
So if the Western missionary can't go in, does the work just stop?
And that's the pivot. This is the most fascinating part of the research to me. The work isn't stopping, it's shifting. We are seeing the rise of the indigenous translator.
Locals,
people who were born in the village who speak the language perfectly because it's their mother tongue. The report details this method called MAST.
Mobile Assistant Supporting Translation.
That's it.
I read about that. But help me understand the mobile part. Is this just like Zoom for translators?
It's much more robust than that. It's about decentralization. They equip these local believers with these, ruggedized tablets loaded with specialized translation software.
Okay.
The key is that the data isn't just on the device. It syncs to the cloud via satellite whenever they get a signal.
So if the village gets raided or...
Exactly. If the ADF attacks or if an Ebola outbreak forces an evacuation, the translator grabs the tablet and runs. They don't lose the manuscripts. The work moves with them to the refugee camp. It makes the translation project resilient to war.
That's incredible. And the notes mention something else, print on demand.
Right. So historically, you'd finish a translation and then wait 2 years for a shipping container to clear customs or get bribed at the port or hijacked.
Sure.
Now, they're using these portable printing rigs that can fit in the back of a truck. They can print the Gospel of John right there in the rainforest as soon as it's proved.
It's guerrilla publishing.
Essentially, yes. It completely bypasses the blockade.
But there was one human element in the report that really caught me off guard. It wasn't about the tech. It was about the people holding the tablets. The sources talk about rival tribes reconciling just to do this work.
That's the miracle inside the logistics. You have to understand, some of these tribes have been in blood feuds for generations.
Wow.
We're talking about cycles of revenge killings over land or cattle. But the MAMAS-T training brings them together. You literally have a member of one tribe and a member of an enemy tribe sitting at a table looking at the same text, arguing over the best word for peace or forgiveness.
That gives me chills. The act of translating the word is actually doing the work of the word before it's even printed.
Precisely. But, and we have to be honest about the obstacles, there is a snag. The report mentions Vision 2025.
Yeah, I saw that. It says there are 400 languages globally, but heavily concentrated here, where the plans are ready.
Right.
The indigenous teams are identified, the tablets are sourced, but they are stalled.
Funding. It's purely a resource gap. The gas tank is empty.
Yeah.
The tragedy is that political stability in these zones is a window. It opens and closes very fast.
So if the funding isn't there when the peace holds?
You might miss the chance for another decade.
Okay, so we have the logistics and we have the funding gap. But now I want to shift gears to the environment these people are working in. The outline calls it the dual spiritual warfare. And honestly, this is the part of the deep dive that gets pretty dark.
It does. And that term dual is critical here. In the West, we tend to compartmentalize. We think of spiritual warfare as, abstract or internal, or we think of persecution as physical violence.
Sure.
In Central Africa, in 2026, it is both happening at the same time. You have the sword, the external physical violence, and you have the lie, the internal spiritual confusion.
Let's start with the sword. The stats from 2025 are just grim.
They're heavy. In the DRC alone, 339 Christians were confirmed killed specifically for their faith. And I think we need to slow down and not just let that be a number. That is 339 individual lives.
There was one incident detailed in the report that really drives that home. February 2025, Kasanga, DRC.
Yes.
This wasn't a skirmish in the bush. ISIS-affiliated groups attacked a Protestant church during the worship service. They didn't just fire into the building. They went inside the sanctuary and beheaded 70 Christians.
It is calculated terror. This isn't random violence. The sources make it clear that groups like ISIS DRC have a strategic goal: the elimination of Christianity to establish Islamic rule. They use incidents like Kasanga to send a message to every surrounding village: convert, leave, or die.
It's terrifying, but then you have this other side, the lie, the internal confusion. The notes talk about syncretism, and I think for a lot of us, that's a seminary word. What does it actually look like on the ground?
Syncretism is basically hedging your bets. It's mixing two opposing belief systems to try to cover all your bases. In the Central African Republic, for example, 85% of the population identifies as Christian. On paper, it's a Christian nation.
Right.
But in practice, animism, traditional witchcraft, ancestor worship, it still controls the culture.
So you go to church on Sunday to secure heaven, but you go to the witch doctor on Monday to secure your job.
Exactly. It's transactional. The report highlights Uganda specifically regarding the 2026 elections. You have politicians who are publicly Christian sitting in the front row of the cathedral for the photo op. But privately, they are paying massive sums to witch doctors to curse their opponents or to guarantee a win.
And people know this.
Everyone knows it. And it creates a spiritual environment where Jesus is seen as just one power among many rather than the King of Kings. You just add him to your collection of spiritual insurance policies.
The most disturbing part of this section of the report for me was the part on child witchcraft.
Yeah, this is happening across the DRC and the region. When a family faces misfortune, maybe a crop fails or someone dies suddenly, they look for a spiritual cause.
Yeah.
And often, a child is scapegoated.
Just any child.
Usually the most vulnerable. Maybe a child with a disability or one who's just a bit rebellious or an orphan. They're accused of being witches.
Oh, my goodness.
And because of this syncretism, local pastors, who often don't have deep biblical training, will validate the accusation. They'll perform violent exorcisms. Or the children are just thrown out onto the street to fend for themselves.
That's heartbreaking, but it brings us right back to segment 1, doesn't it?
It connects perfectly. Why is there so much syncretism?
Right.
Why do people mix witchcraft with Jesus? Because they don't have the Bible in their heart language. They're hearing the gospel in French or English or a trade language, but they live their deep, emotional, fearful lives in their tribal language. If God doesn't speak your heart language, he feels like a foreign god. When the crisis hits, you revert to the old gods who speak your dialect.
So the translation isn't just about literacy. It's the only antidote to the witchcraft.
You cannot fight the lie without the truth being accessible.
That makes so much sense. Now, there's a third group of people caught in this crossfire. We've talked about the indigenous believers, the translators, but we have to talk about the families sent there to facilitate this work, the missionary kids or MKs.
This is where the cost becomes very, very personal.
We're looking at a study here called Caution and Hope by TCK Training. And I have to be honest, reading these numbers was tough. I think we have this assumption that because a family is doing God's work, there's this bubble of divine protection around their household.
The data tells a very different story.
This study says that 17% of missionary kids are at high risk of adverse outcomes. We're talking substance abuse, severe depression, suicidality later in life.
That's nearly 1 in 5 is a huge number.
And the abuse statistics. The report says MKs experience emotional abuse at 4 times the rate of their peers back home. 40% report feelings of neglect.
40%.
But the one that really shocked me, and I had to read it twice, is that more than 1 in 4 MKs experience child-to-child sexual abuse.
It is the highest rate of any globally mobile population.
How does this happen? I mean, these are families dedicated to ministry. Are we talking about bad parenting here?
We have to be really careful not to frame this as simply bad parenting. It's systemic vulnerability. Think about the environment we just described. These parents are working in war zones. They're dealing with beheadings, Ebola, extreme poverty. They are exhausted. They're traumatized themselves.
So it's a pressure cooker.
It is. And often, in the drive to save the lost or translate the next verse, the children at home get pushed to the margins. Plus, there's the isolation. If you're in a remote village, who are your peers? Who is supervising the playtime?
Right.
Historically, this happened in boarding schools, but even in village settings, the lack of supervision creates opportunities for abuse, often from older kids to younger kids.
It really shatters that myth that missionary means immune to sin.
It does.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the second half of that study title, Caution and Hope. Because it's not all darkness.
Right. The resilience stats are actually kind of mind-blowing.
They are. Despite this high trauma profile, 81% of MKs retain a vibrant faith into adulthood. That's vastly higher than the general population in the U.S.
So they go through the fire, but they don't burn up.
They emerge with a unique kind of strength. They are hidden heroes. They're multilingual, culturally adaptive. They understand the complexity of the world in a way most adults never will. They know that God is big enough to handle the darkness because they've seen it up close.
And it seems like the industry is waking up to the need for protection. The sources mention organizations like ISMK and the Child Safety and Protection Network.
Yes. There are now over 130 organizations implementing rigorous safeguarding policies. The attitude has shifted from the Lord will protect them to the Lord expects us to protect them. The solution isn't to pull families off the field because of the translation have to happen, but to support them better, to ensure they aren't neglected.
So let's try to pull all of this together. We've looked at the empty Bible translation slots in the DRC. We've looked at the horror of the dual warfare, ISIS and witchcraft. We've looked at the hidden trauma of the kids. It feels massive.
It is massive. But that's why the mission of this deep dive and the Missions Connect mandate is strategic intercession. We aren't asking you, the listener, to solve the geopolitical crisis of the Congo. We are asking you to pray. But to pray with intelligence.
So if I'm taking the challenge, so I'm setting aside my 15 minutes today, what specifically am I praying for? The guide gives us 3 targets.
First, pray for the translation frontier. But don't just pray for books. Pray for those mass teams. Pray for the indigenous translator carrying a tablet through a checkpoint right now. Pray that the signal connects. And pray for that Vision 2025 funding to unlock the stalled projects.
Okay, target 1, the indigenous teams. Target 2,
the spiritual battle. Specifically, pray for the exposure and renunciation of syncretism. Pray that believers in Uganda and Sayar would have a revelation that Jesus is superior to the witch doctor, that they would break those transactional ties. And simply, pray for physical protection against the sword of ISIS.
And target 3 is the families.
Yes. Pray for the hidden heroes. Pray specifically for that 17% who are at high risk. Pray for healing from the abuse we discussed. And pray for the parents, that they would have the wisdom to balance the Great Commission with the commission to protect their own home.
You know, as we talk through this, it strikes me that we often use military language in church front lines, spiritual warfare, like it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
But for these people, in 2026, it is not a metaphor. It's their Tuesday morning.
That's the reality. Real people are risking beheading to get a verse of scripture translated. Real children are navigating trauma so their parents can serve.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to end on. You mentioned something in the pre-show about the cost.
Yeah, we often count the cost of missions in dollars. We say it costs $50 to print a Bible, or it costs $100,000 to launch a team. But if you look at Central Africa, the currency isn't dollars.
It is it.
The currency is blood. It's the blood of the martyrs in Kasanga. It's the loss of innocence of the children facing trauma. They are paying a price that we can barely comprehend in our context.
Wow.
So the question I'm left with, and I think the question every listener should sit with, is this. Is our prayer life expensive enough to match their sacrifice?
Wow. Is our intercession expensive enough?
It's the only question that matters this week.
We're going to leave you with that.
Yeah.
A Missions Connect mandate asks for 12 to 15 minutes of prayer a day. Use the targets we just covered. And check the notes. There's a bonus challenge to research just one specific DRC language group this week. Pick one of the 170 and own it in prayer.
Do it. It changes how you see the world.
Until the next deep dive, keep praying.
So, you want a faith that actually matters, right? You want to make a difference in the world, to see the gospel changing lives, to know that your walk with God and His Word is impacting more than just your own life. Yeah, you want your life to count for the nations. But here's the thing. You're busy, maybe overwhelmed. You're pulled in 20 different directions. And even though you want to engage in missions and the Great Commission, you don't always know what to pray for, what's happening globally, or what your next step should be. The desire to obey is there, but the pathway isn't always clear. Let the Missions Connect app show you the way. Every day, you'll get a missions-focused devotional with a simple, practical action step and an option to share with the Missions Connect community. Every week, you get 3 strategic prayer focuses with fresh daily text and audio prayers, so you're never guessing about what to pray for. And when you're ready, you'll find opportunities to actually get involved in God's global work. Everything in the devotional and prayer section is free forever, but we offer you the opportunity to try the premium version for 15 days. You want to impact the nations with the gospel? With Missions Connect, now you can. Missions Connect, helping you bless the nations through prayer, knowledge, and obedience. A ministry of assisting2obey.com.